Hey everyone, Sober Oni of G&A Reviews here to bring you another Servant Spotlight. This time we're going to focus on the Flower of Olympia herself, Nero. This is a special spotlight in that Nero wasn't specifically requested by you guys the most, but it is Nero Fest, so I figured why not give her her time to shine and just give her her own spotlight. So as usual, we're going to take a look at her stats and skills first, followed by some tips on how to use her and team comps, and finally just an overall grade on how she compares to the other 4-star servants. So first things first, her stats. Nero is a 4-star saber with a max raw attack stat of 9,449 and an HP of 11,753. Both of these stats are very middling. Neither her attack nor her HP is very high among 4 stars. She's really middle of the road, and that means that neither of those stats are low either. And as strange as it sounds, having an average stat can be a welcome rarity depending on how your skills shape up, because many servants tend to swing wildly in one direction or the other. Either they have a lot of attack and very low HP, or too much HP and not attack. So it's kind of good sometimes to just be in the average. And speaking of skills, Nero has 3. She has Migraine rank B, which increases mental debuff resist between 50 to 100% and restores between 500 and 2000 HP. She also has Imperial Privilege X, which has a 60% chance of buffing her attack and defense between 22 to 44%, and it also heals her for between 1200 to 3400 HP. And finally, she'll be getting Thrice Setting Sun through an interlude, which is a skill that applies Guts to her 3 times for 5 turns, bringing her back alive with between 300 and 600 HP. For her passive, she has Magic Resistance C, so increasing debuff resist by 15%. She has Riding B to increase Quick Card performance by 8%, and her deck is Quick Arts Buster Buster with an Arts Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Laus St. Claudius, which is an AoE that ignores defense and can reduce defense, and also has an interlude that further increases the damage modifier significantly. So now we get to where Nero shines. This is what separates her from being an average servant with average stats, and that's her ridiculous skill set. Her passives aren't really that useful. Debuff resist is only 15%, and she only has 1 quick card, so her riding skill is just pretty useless. But she does have 2 of the strongest skills in the entire game among all the servants, and those skills are Imperial Privilege X and Thrice Setting Sun. Imperial Privilege X not only heals her for a lot, but at max rank, it can also buff your overall attack and defense by 44% for 3 turns. That's huge, for 3 turns. And that's only on a 5-turn cooldown. And that's just an insanely broken skill that's easy to abuse. So notice that most buffs in this game either only buff between 5 to 21%, or if they do buff for 30% or more, it's only a buff for a specific card that only lasts 1 turn. Something like Arturia's Mana Burst that only buffs Buster cards, but it can buff it up to 50%. Imperial Privilege buffs all damage for 44% at max rank for 3 turns. That essentially gives Nero a 5-star level attack strength when it's active. And despite that broken skill, Thrice Setting Sun is just as ridiculous because it grants her 3 extra lives for 5 turns. So she dies, she comes back. She dies again, she comes back. She dies again, she comes back. Combined with the fact that her other 2 skills heal her for a considerable amount, you can see kind of what her niche is, in that she's just almost unkillable. Nero just refuses to die. But that being said, she does have a few drawbacks. Her first skill is just a mediocre heal. The debuff resist only grants mental debuff resistance, meaning it only works against charm. There are no other mental debuffs in the game as far as I know. Maybe Guiles might have like a fear or terror effect, but needless to say, it's a useless skill since 1, charm is not a common skill, 2, most servants with charm are female and it only works against males, and 3, the AI just never really uses charm to begin with, so it might as well not even be there. Also, the 60% chance on her Imperial Privilege is very bad. It says 60%, but it really feels more like 20%. It hardly ever activates, and maybe it's just me, I don't know, but the defense buff activates way more frequently than the attack buff, and you can just never really rely on this skill anytime at all, and when you do get the attack buff, it just feels like you won like a mini lottery. So as strong as it is, it's just not that reliable. As far as team comps go and how you want to use her, she is an Arts Saber and she fits exceedingly well into Arts teams. In particular, Hans Andersen makes a phenomenal pair with her, as he can just charge her Noble Phantasm quickly with his deck, and his Noble Phantasm also heals her for 3000 HP, and at rank 5 it has an 80% chance to increase her attack and defense by 40%. So it's kind of like a mini Imperial Privilege on top of her already Imperial Privilege that she has. And considering how easy he is to get from the friend point gacha, it's not going to be hard to get him to Noble Phantasm 5, so that's fantastic. And if you manage to proc both his Noble Phantasm and her Imperial Privilege, you're looking at like an 88% buff to your attack and defense, which is just bananas. Of course, Waver is also great for charging her Noble Phantasm and buffing her attack. He's great with everybody, but I also love putting her together with Mashu, since she can keep Nero alive pretty much forever with her defense buffing and invincibility skills. And I usually don't mention any servants who aren't already out in the English version, but in this case there are two servants I need to mention because they just pair so perfectly with Nero, and they're just not out yet, but I'm going to mention them anyway. They are Tamamo no Mae and Ozymandias. Tamamo's going to be out soon, so I do suggest saving for her, but for now, I'm just going to mention she has one of the strongest arts buffs in the entire game, and she has Noble Phantasm that lowers cooldowns. On the other hand, Ozymandias is going to take a long time to come out, he's a long way away, but he has a skill that increases the buff rate of any skills by 40%, meaning Nero's Imperial Privilege can actually be made to never miss. It basically wipes away the chance that Imperial Privilege won't activate. So obviously you can see how devastating they can be when paired with Nero. And because Nero is so reliant on her arts, Formal Craft is without a doubt the best craft essence to use on her. It buffs her damage considerably, and it helps her charge her Noble Phantasm faster. But there are also other craft essences that may be coming out down the road that do things like heal X amount of HP per turn, or increase all healing skills by a certain percentage. And both of those are completely viable on Nero if you want to do a pure tank version of her. And so it's really hard to give Nero an overall rating because her power really depends on what kind of support she has. On her own, she's a balanced attacker that's pretty much unkillable, and there have been plenty of instances where she comes in handy, like late game missions or raids, where you really want to just stall for time or stay alive. And she works as a sweeper too, because her thrice setting sun is just so versatile. It'll keep her alive while she attacks at the end of the turns. And it's just invaluable. It makes her borderline the best tank in the entire game, along with Mashu and Ruler. And she can also be abused with the right team, again with someone like Tamamo there to lower her cooldowns and charge her Noble Phantasm, and maybe someone like Waver, or Ozymandias, Mash, or Hans there to just buff her up constantly. She can pretty much be one of the few servants in the game who is quite literally unkillable, because her skills will just constantly be off cooldown, her Imperial Privilege will be constantly activated. That being said, outside of an arts team, she really barely manages to hold her own weight. She has an unreliable buff and just won't hit as hard as most other sabers that are more dedicated attackers. But in the end, before she gets her third skill, Interlude, I'd say she's a solid B. She's just an average servant with average stats and kind of just normal skills. But after she gets that thrice setting sun, she really jumps up to an A-, with potential to be completely game-breaking in the right team. And if you haven't rolled for her yet, I really encourage you to do so if you're trying to build an arts team, since she can thrive with the proper art supports. Alright guys, that's my servant spotlight for Nero. I'm going to be working on the next two servant spotlights to kind of catch up. They're going to be Vlad and Hercules, because those have been crazy requested. Also coming out with my best 3-star and lower video as well. If it's not out already, it might be. But if it is, I'll link it in the description below. If not, look forward to it. It should be out relatively soon. And of course, I will be putting out more videos of me walking through Nero Fest so you guys can see me struggle to kind of get through Nero Fest with my team. But until next time, guys, this is Sober Oni. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, comment, subscribe. I always want to hear from you guys, whether you agree with me or not. I want to know if you rolled Nero this Nero Fest and just what your plans are for her. But leave a like, comment, subscribe as always. And this is Sober Oni signing out. Peace.